Happy day to all. Class 10 Biology, Chapter 15 Our Environment, Day 1. Introduction. We have heard the word environment often being used on the television, in newspaper, and by people around us. Environment. What what does it mean? Environ means about, or it is the sum total of all external factors, substances, living beings, and conditions that surround an organism and influence the same without becoming its part. It consists of both living as well as non-living components, and each of which has several subcomponents which are interlinked and interdependent on each other. So in this chapter, we shall be studying how various factors in the environment interact with each other and how we impact the environment. Concept 15.1. What happens when we add our waste to the environment? That is the effect of adding waste to the environment. So the human activities produce a lot of waste materials which are thrown away into the environment. And these waste, they cause pollution, air pollution, water pollution, as well as soil pollution. The waste materials produced here are of two main types. They are biodegradable waste and non-biodegradable waste. So first we will see biodegradable waste. They are the waste which are decomposed into harmless substances by microorganisms. An example, vegetable peels, fruits, pulses or full vegetables, cereals, cotton, jute, wool, wood, leather, paper, animal dung, as well as animal bones. And next, it is the non-biodegradable waste. So they are the waste which are not decomposed by the microorganisms. Example, polythene bags, plastics, synthetic fibers, glass, metals, synthetic rubber, insecticides, as well as pesticides. Concept 15.2. Ecosystem. What are its components? Ecosystem. An ecosystem consists of all living organisms in an area along with the non-living components and their interaction. So the interaction means the interlinking or interdependence. There are different types of ecosystem and they are as follows. The first one is the natural ecosystem, and the second type, they are the artificial ecosystem. So natural ecosystem is naturally formed like forest, desert, grasslands, mountains, ponds, lakes, rivers, oceans, etc. An artificial ecosystem, they are like gardens, parks, crop field, aquarium, zoos, etc. An ecosystem consists of two main components, and they are living component and non-living component. So the living component, we call it as biotic components. They are the living components like plants, animals, as well as microorganisms. They consist of producers, consumers, and decomposers. So the term producers, they produce something, or they are the green plants which produce food by means of photosynthesis. And the second, they are the consumers. They form these herbivores, that is, they get their food directly from plants, and we call them as herbivores. And the second type, they are the carnivores, which get their food indirectly from plants. And the third one, they are the omnivores, which they get food directly or indirectly from plants. Next, they are the decomposers. So they are nothing but microorganisms which decompose dead plants and animals. They decompose the complex organic substances into simple inorganic substances in the soil, which are again used by plants. Next, it is the abiotic components, are the non-living components like air, water, soil, minerals, sunlight, temperature, wind, etc. So next we have the food chain. So what is a food chain? Food we know, that is we get energy from food. And what is a chain? So a chain of passage of nutrients from or energy from one level to another level. So we will see what it is. So a food chain is the flow of food energy from one organisms to the next and to the next and so on. And they usually start with the producer, that is nothing but the plants, and end with the carnivore. And in a food chain, an organism gets food from one group of organisms. So here we have some examples. So the producer, which becomes the grass, primary consumer, it's the deer, secondary consumer forms the lion. So different, this is only the two layer, whereas three layers as well as the four layers, we can see grass to insects, from insects to frog, frog to snakes, or grass with moth, and from moth to frog, frog to snake, and snake to hawk. So here you can see the trophic level, where the functional role as well as the food chain. So a producer, it becomes a plant, and a primary consumer becomes a moth, and secondary consumer. So moth will be eaten up by the frog, and the tertiary consumer, the snake feeds on the frog, and the quaternary consumer, which forms the ultimate carnivore, which is the hawk, which feeds on the snakes. And finally comes the decomposers, that is nothing but, they are nothing but bacteria and fungi. And one more food chain you can see, from grass to cricket, and the cricket eaten up by a bird, and bird being eaten up by a snake. And down below you can see the two different types of food chain, a food chain, a terrestrial food chain and a marine food chain, where you can see the lower level we have the primary consumers, and before that, below the primary consumer, we have the primary producer, and producer, from producer the energy flows to the primary consumer, and from the primary consumer it moves to the secondary consumer, and from the secondary consumer to the tertiary consumer, from the tertiary consumer to the quaternary consumers. And few more food chains that you can see here, from the primary producers, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, and then the decomposers. So different levels again explained as a primary consumer, primary producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, and then the quaternary consumers in grassland, in the pond, as well as in the ocean biome. Next topic, it is food web. So web, as we know it, it's a network of connection. So maybe we can explain it as many food chains can form a food web. So a food web is a group of several interconnected food chains. So in a food web, an organism gets food from more than one group of organisms, where a simple food web will have. So earlier also we have seen from grass, grasshopper, frog, and then snake. And there are in between we have different interconnection seen. We call it as food. Thank you.